My brother disappeared on a Tuesday. That is the fact the family has lived around for 31 years. Not into thin air, not without explanation. He walked into the San Juan Mountains in southwestern Colorado on a Tuesday in October of 1993, and he did not walk back out. The search lasted 11 days. They found his pack, about 4 miles up the trail from where he had camped. They found one boot, which is the detail that has never made sense to anyone. Because you do not lose one boot on a mountain trail unless something very specific has happened. And none of the specific things anyone could think of accounted for everything else they did not find. They did not find him. They did not find remains. They did not find clothing beyond the boot. They did not find anything that explained the boot being where it was and everything else being nowhere at all. The case is still open. Technically, nobody is working it. My name is Caroline Marsh. I am 54 years old. I live in Durango, which is about an hour from where my brother went missing. And I have lived here for 22 years. And people sometimes ask me why I stayed so close. I never know how to answer that. The closest I can get is this. I stayed because leaving felt like a second disappearance. My brother's name was Daniel. He was 26 years old. He was a geology PhD student at Colorado State, and he had been hiking in the San Juans since he was a teenager, and he knew that country the way people know country they have loved for a long time. He was not a careless person. He was not reckless. He was the kind of hiker who filed trip plans and carried the right gear and turned back when the weather said to turn back. He did not turn back that Tuesday, and for 31 years I've been trying to understand why. I found the answer 18 months ago, in a storage unit in Cortez, in a box I had been paying $14 a month to not look at for a decade, was my brother's field notebook. I had thought it was lost. I had thought it was on the mountain. I do not know how it got into that box. I do not know who put it there. But it was there, and I read it. And I am going to tell you what it said. Because Daniel wrote, on the last page, in handwriting that was not as steady as his usual handwriting, that if anything happened to him, he wanted someone to know the truth. I am the someone. And this is the truth. Daniel had been going to the San Juans for 15 years by the time he disappeared. He had hiked every major trail in the Weminuche wilderness, which is one of the largest wilderness areas in Colorado. 330,000 acres of high country, lakes and peaks and valleys that most people never reach, that go weeks in the off-season without seeing a human being. He loved it. He writes about it in the early pages of the notebook, the way people write about places they love, with the specific detail of someone who has been paying attention for a long time. He knew which lakes had the best cutthroat in August. He knew which passes held snow until July, and which were clear by June. He knew the afternoon thunderstorm patterns, which in the San Juans in summer are not suggestions, but facts, and he planned his days around them. He knew that country. And in the summer of 1992, about 14 months before he disappeared, he began to suspect that the country knew something he did not. He writes, "I have been coming up here long enough to know what is normal and what is not. I am a scientist. I document things. I have a methodology. And what I have been documenting over the past 3 trips does not fit any methodology I have." He had been finding tracks, not bear, not elk, not mountain lion. He had been finding tracks at high elevation, above timberline, in places that did not make sense for any large animal to be, because there was something to eat up there and no shelter. And in the shoulder seasons, the weather was too severe for anything that was not a bird or a pita. But the tracks were there. He had measured them. He had photographed them. He had made plaster casts of 2 of them, which he describes in the notebook with the precision of someone who has been trained to record physical evidence carefully. Large, very large, bipedal, 5 toes, no claw marks. The stride, when he could trace a complete sequence, was between 5 and 6 feet. He writes, "I know what these look like. I know what anyone would say they look like. I am aware of the literature, such as it is, and I am aware of the problems with that literature. I am not a credulous person. I do not want to be the person who finds what I am finding. But I am finding it, and I am a scientist. And a scientist documents what is in front of him, whether or not it is convenient." He first saw one in July of 1993, 3 months before he disappeared. He had gone up to a lake he calls Lake 11 in the notebook, which I believe is an unnamed lake at about 11,000 feet in the southern Weminuche. He had camped there twice before. It was a small lake, with good fishing, and a view of the peaks to the north that he writes about with more warmth than he writes about almost anything else. He had been there 2 days when he woke at first light and looked out of his tent, and saw it on the far shore of the lake. He does not write dramatically about this moment. He is a scientist. He writes like a scientist. He writes, "Observed large bipedal subject, far shore, approximately 80 meters. Subject appeared to be drinking from lake. Dark coloration, heavy build. Height estimated 7.5 to 8 feet. Subject was aware of my presence, looked directly at tent, did not flee. Observed for approximately 4 minutes, until subject moved into tree line to northwest. Movement was deliberate and unhurried. 4 minutes, 80 meters. Full morning light." He writes, "I'm going to be very careful about what I say next, because I am going to say something that will sound like it is not from a scientist. It was not afraid of me. That is the thing I keep coming back to. Not the size, not the gait, not any of the physical details. The fact that it was not afraid of me. Everything in that country at that elevation is afraid of people, because people are the most dangerous thing that comes to high country, and the animals know it. This didn't know it, or knew it, and had decided I was not the kind of person it needed to be afraid of. I do not know which of those is more unsettling." He went back in September. 6 weeks before he disappeared, he went back to Lake 11, and he camped in the same spot, and he waited. He writes, "I am aware that this is not standard field methodology. I am aware that I am doing something that is closer to what a naturalist does than what a geologist does. I do not care. I have been thinking about those 4 minutes for 2 months, and I need more information." He waited 3 days. On the 3rd evening, at dusk, it came back. Not to the far shore this time, to the near shore, 20 feet from his camp. He writes, "I did not move. I had decided, in advance of this possibility, that I would not move, that I would sit exactly where I was and let it approach at whatever distance it chose, and that I wouldn't make any sudden motion, and that I would breathe slowly. I want to tell you how large it was, from 20 feet. I have spent the past 6 weeks trying to develop a frame of reference that would be useful to another person. I have not been able to develop one. There is no frame of reference for this, not because the size itself is incomprehensible, but because the size in combination with the quality of its attention is incomprehensible. It was looking at me the way I look at a core sample, interested, methodical, taking in information. It stood at the edge of my camp for approximately 8 minutes. It made no sound. I made no sound. And then it turned and walked up the slope and into the dark. And I sat in my camp, and I will be honest, and say that my hands were shaking. Not from fear, exactly. From the effort of 8 minutes of complete stillness. And from something else that I do not have a scientific word for. He went back in October, the Tuesday in October. He writes, in the last entry before the handwriting changes, that he was going back to Lake 11 for one more visit before the snow closed the passes. He had something he wanted to do. He had been thinking about it since September. He writes, I have been approaching this the wrong way. I have been approaching it as a subject of study, as something to be observed and documented, and it has allowed that, to a point. But I think it has also been doing something that I have not adequately accounted for in my methodology. It has been studying me. And I think the appropriate response to being studied by something that is studying you is not to continue pretending you are the only scientist in the room. I think the appropriate response is to make yourself a subject, to offer information the way it has been offering information, to give as well as take. I am going to leave something at the lake, something that communicates, as clearly as I can communicate it, who I am. He does not say what he was going to leave. That is the last normal entry. The next entry is the one where the handwriting is different. I have looked at that last entry many times. I have looked at it in good light and bad light. I have looked at it with a magnifying glass. I have photographed it and zoomed in until the pixels blurred. It is his handwriting. I am certain of that. But it is his handwriting under some kind of stress, or in some kind of hurry, or in conditions that made writing difficult. It says, not what I expected. Not dangerous. Tried to explain. Don't think the words worked, but something else did. Going higher with them. Chose to go. Important that whoever finds this knows I chose. And then below that, in letters that are larger and less careful, don't look for me up here. You won't find what you're looking for. I left something at the lake, northeast shore, under the flat granite. If you find it, you'll understand. And then his name, just his name, Daniel. I went to Lake 11 in August of last year. It took me 2 days to get there, because I am 54 years old and not a backpacker. And the route is not simple. I went alone, which my husband did not want me to do, and which I did anyway, because some things you cannot do with another person present. The lake was exactly as Daniel had described it. Small, dark, very cold, ringed with boulder fields and dwarf willow and the kind of scrubby Krumholtz spruce that grows at that elevation, looking like it is being pushed sideways by a wind that never entirely stops. The peaks to the north were exactly as he described. I found the northeast shore. I found the flat granite. I lifted it. Under it was a waterproof bag, the kind geologists use for field samples. Inside the bag was a photograph. The photograph was of our family, a specific photograph taken in 1987 at our parents' house in Durango on a Sunday afternoon in summer. Daniel and me and our parents and our grandmother, who is gone now. all of us in the backyard, squinting into the sun. Daniel is 20 years old in the photograph. He's smiling. On the back of the photograph, in his handwriting, he had written, "This is my family. This is where I come from. This is what I am made of." And below that, "I am leaving this here because I am going to go higher, and I want something of mine to stay at this level. Something that belongs down here." And below that, in smaller letters, "Tell Caroline the boot was not an accident. It was a marker. Northeast Shore. She'll know what that means. I am Caroline, and I know what it means. A marker. He left marker. The way a scientist leaves a marker, when he is going somewhere he is not sure he can return from. And he wants someone to be able to trace his path. He left his boot as a marker, and then he went higher. I sat at that lake for the rest of that day, into the evening, until the light went off the peaks and the water went from blue to black. I was not waiting for anything specific. I do not think I was expecting to see anything. I was just sitting in the place where my brother had sat 30 years ago and looked across the water at something that looked back and decided, in whatever way a scientist decides, to go further than the methodology allowed. I did not see anything at the lake. I want to be honest about that. But I will tell you this. On the morning of the second day, when I woke up and went out of my tent, there was a stone on the flat granite where I had found the bag. A piece of dark stone, smooth, the kind that comes from deep in the mountains, not from any stream bed near there. I picked it up. I held it. I put it in my pocket. I carried it down the mountain. I have it on my desk now, next to the photograph. I do not know who put it there. I have thought about it many times. I have not been able to explain it. Not to my own satisfaction. Not in any way that would satisfy anyone else. The stone was not there when I went to sleep. It was there when I woke up. And I was alone at that lake. Those are the facts. What the facts mean, I genuinely do not know. I want to tell you what I believe, or rather, I want to tell you what I cannot stop coming back to, which is not quite the same thing as belief. I cannot stop coming back to the notebook, to the last entry, to the words, "I chose." That entry is in his handwriting. He left a marker. He left the photograph. He went higher. Those are things he did. Those are documented. What came after, I cannot document. I do not know what came after. I know that 31 years have passed and no remains have been found. I know the case is still open. I know that somewhere in 330,000 acres of high country, in terrain that goes weeks without seeing a human being, something happened to my brother that none of the conventional explanations have ever accounted for. And I know that he wrote, "I chose." That is what I keep coming back to. Not a conclusion. Just that. I chose. There is one more thing. In August, when I was at the lake, on the second morning, before I found the stone, I woke up in the dark. Not because of a sound. Not because of anything I could identify. I just woke up. The way you wake up sometimes when something has changed in the room, and lay there in the dark, and listened, and I heard, very faintly, from somewhere up the slope above the lake, in the dark above timberline, where nothing with any sense should be at 3 in the morning, a sound, long, low, carrying, the kind of sound that has been designed, over a very long time, to travel across large distances of mountain air. I lay in my tent, and I listened. It came again, from a different position, farther along the ridge, moving, and then, much closer than I expected. From the boulder field just above camp, an answer. Also long, also low, but different, shorter, and with a quality that I am going to describe, and I know how this will sound, but I am going to describe it anyway. It had the quality of a name, not my name, a name I did not know, a name in a language I do not speak, but a name. I lay in my tent and I did not move, and I listened to it go back and forth, twice more, and then stop. And then there was just the wind, and the sound the dwarf willow makes in the wind, and the very distant sound of water somewhere below. And I lay there, and I thought about my brother, 20 years old in the photograph, squinting into the Sunday light, smiling. I do not know what I heard. I want to be honest about that. I do not know if what I heard was what I think it might have been. I do not know if the stone means what part of me wants it to mean. I do not know if the notebook tells the whole story, or only the part Daniel had words for. What I know is what is documented. The notebook, the photograph, the marker, the last entry. I chose. And somewhere in those 330,000 acres, in the country above the last trees, where the rock comes out bare and the sky is too big, and the afternoon storms roll in from the west, my brother went. Willingly, he said. Further than the methodology allows, he said. I do not know what that means, exactly. I do not think I am supposed to know. I think that is the point. He was always going to go further than the rest of us. He was always going to look at the thing in front of him and say, I need more information. And then go get it. Whatever it cost. That is who he was. That is who he is. Or was. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I have decided, after 31 years, that not knowing is something I can live with, that the evidence is enough to hold on to, even without a conclusion, that a marker and a photograph and a last entry in a field notebook and a stone on a flat piece of granite at 11,000 feet is more than most people get, and I will take it. My name is Caroline Marsh. I am 54 years old. I live in Durango, Colorado, 1 hour from the San Juan Mountains. My brother Daniel disappeared in October of 1993. The case is still open. I am not asking anyone to look for him. I am asking only that you understand. If you have listened to all of this, that disappearance is not the same as death. That going further than the methodology allows is not the same as being lost. That there are places in this country so high and so old and so far beyond the edge of anything we have mapped, that the things that live there have their own names for each other. And that once in a very long while, one of those names is a human name, said by something that is not human. On a ridge in the dark, above a lake where the fish are good in August, and the view of the peaks to the north, Daniel wrote, is the best view in Colorado. He wrote that on the first page of the notebook, long before any of the rest of it. He just loved it up there. He just loved it. And in the end, I think, it loved him back, or something did. I don't know what to call it. I just know what the evidence says. And I know what he wrote. I chose.